a very warm welcome to this top one-to-one conversation. We're in very good company here today. A very warm welcome to Baron Buysse.
Thank you.
Baron Buysse, of course, you are the CEO of Bekaert, global company, serving customers in 120 countries around the world, with 28,000 staff, more than 4 billion euros worth of sales last year, offering advanced solutions using metal transformation, steel, cord, and of course, you, before that, were the CEO of Vickers, a British-based company going back to the second half of the 19th century. And after your work there, Queen Elizabeth II made you a commander of the British Empire for the work you did there. Bekaert, of course, has been around since 1880. Now, maybe that says something about resilience, maybe one of the values that we'll be able to discuss in a moment. But let me ask you, you've now been the president of Bekaert since the beginning of the millennium. What's the baseline at Bekaert?
The baseline of Bekaert is very simple. It says, better together.
It is my privilege to join you at this very special moment in the history of Bekaert, opening of the India Technical Center.
Mr. Buysse, we're in the company of students, business students. We have many of them online. They will be able to ask questions during the broadcast. Is it a good idea to be a business student, to achieve what you're achieving there? We'll come back to many of the things we've seen out there: charisma, resilience, strength, international. Is it a good idea to start studying to get there?
I think it's a wonderful idea. There's nothing more passionate in life, well, amongst the three major things that gives you passion in life, is to create wealth, to develop a company, to do it with people, to work together, to have the passion to develop a company. Those who think that my only job is to cut ribbons, that's not true. We do other things than that on these trips. No, I think it's a wonderful idea, especially in this day and age.
When you started off at Ford, you worked your way through the company for 10 years. What is it that you learned there that any business student should learn before they start getting down to do their work?
I think that Ford was a very demanding school. I was a college graduate trainee at Ford, and we were supposed to follow a certain routine and a certain program. I learned a couple of things. The first thing I learned is the sense of responsibility. We were trained to run our department as if it was our own company. And later, I always said to managers who were in charge of a department or even for a company, run it as it was your own company. Have that sense of responsibility. And also, with responsibility comes urgency. You need a sense of responsibility, and you need a sense of urgency, because if you don't have the sense of urgency in managing your company, you'll get nowhere, especially in this day and age. And one of the advantages that I have a lot of disadvantages when I see all the youngsters here in the room, but one of the advantages... Are
you a bit jealous, Baron Buysse?
I'm never jealous, I'm never jealous. But what I feel is that we come from an age, we have seen the start of the fax machine, where you put in a plan or a drawing here, and it came out in New York, which was a revolutionary thing. If you see today how the world is really in reach of whatever you want to do, I think this is a fascinating time to be a student and to prepare your career.
That's about the motivation and urgency and responsibility, etc. What kind of skills does it take to accomplish the objective that should be the objective of anybody in business?
Well, I think that one of the themes that always run or was on the basis of my life is a passion for excellence.
This is the third time you use the word passion, and we're only 2 minutes into the conversation.
Yeah, well, you hear it a couple of 100 times more. But no, I think a passion, when I was in England and I was running Vickers, who was almost bankrupt, a giant, an industrial giant, I put on every wall a passion for excellence. If you have passion and you strive for excellence, I think you must be a winner.
And I think when you first launched the idea, there was a top executive at Vickers who said, passion, that's not very British. What did you tell him?
Do I have to say that?
Yes.
Well, I was in a meeting like this, and I said, we go for passion for excellence. Excellence and a lot of passion. Passion in developing strategy, in implementing strategy, in looking at where we can grow our business profitably and socially. And then the guy said, well, I'm very sorry, sir, but passion is not part of our culture. And I said, well, no, I shouldn't say this. When I come tonight and I look into your bedroom, we'll see whether the Brits have passion or not. and that was the end of the debate.
Okay, back to school curriculums. What do you think of MBAs? Is it a good idea to go for MBAs?
I think it's a wonderful idea to go for MBAs. I think what you need, what is very important, you need to have some human skills. You need to have a dosage of charisma. You need to have
we saw a lot of that displayed in the film, the way that you made the Chinese counterpart laugh, etc. I mean,
he's a very important man in China now. He's part of the Politburo. And I remember that same evening, we were so close that we exchanged ties. I still have his tie in my cupboard, but anyway.
Is that a bit of advice you would give to students?
Yes, why not?
Yeah, get a bit physical, right? Get a bit physical?
Well, physical. With my Chinese friend, I wouldn't insist too much. But it is important it is vitally important to have that close relationship and to express the emotional intelligence. And in an MBA, I think, and the professors here will agree, which is not very obvious to learn. Charisma and emotional intelligence are very difficult to learn. But to come back to your question, Alex, what is important, I come back to the question. What is important in an MBA is it gives you the basis. It gives you the fundamentals to develop your skills, and you can read a balance sheet. You know the ABC of business, you know the theoretical thing. I'm admiring your professors because I know all the hard work they do in trying to really have a combination of the theoretical and the practical skills. And the way they were here is the best proof of that.
And the question I did want to ask you was when you mentioned, that there were things like charisma, like emotional intelligence that were maybe hard to, maybe those are things we should learn outside the curriculum. Is there any way that we can sort of stimulate that help us discover sides of ourselves that maybe we don't even know about yet?
I think it's very difficult. I think what you could do is to take it serious and to do it in group. It's a little bit like public speaking. I've seen people who were petrified to be before an audience and who couldn't talk before an audience. By the way, you don't have that problem, I must say.
None of us do.
But once you learn some basic techniques, it helps you enormously how to run a meeting and to have the meeting short and pragmatic and to go really for the message that is important and address the important elements. All these are techniques that you can learn. But of course, everybody, each of us have their personality. And you can't expect everybody to have doses of emotional intelligence. And not easy to learn, but there are techniques.
But you attach a great deal of importance to this human side, and I don't think you believe you can be a good manager, a good CEO, without being a good and happy human being, right?
I think that's very important. I always say to managers, simple things like, watch your health. Don't drink too much, don't eat too much, live a healthy, or try to live a healthy life, because once you're on the airplanes and you're in the meetings, it will be tough enough. But the essence of all this is that a company and a management team is not isolated. You don't have such thing like a company or a business. No, a business, it's you and me deciding now that we will develop a product or a service, and that together and jointly we will try to find, to base ourselves on the platform of a company we create.
And within an environment, within a society.
And then the company becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, but it comes out of the society. So you are part of the society and you're responsible to the society. So the corporate social responsibility that you hear about so much these days is a reality of life.
It's not just a buzzword, is it?
Absolutely not. We at Bekaert spend money to help the local community developing itself. And this depends. In India, it could be schools. In America, it could be an art class, whatever. What are the needs of the local community? We are part of the community. You are part of the community.
And that brings us to the international side. Is it possible today to be a business student and not look across one's national borders, you think?
The life of you youngsters is international. Speak the languages, meet with your peers at universities. I think that the Erasmus program that the European community developed is wonderful. I pushed my children, who lived for many years in the United States, abroad. Keep your eyes open and see contact, travel a lot, read international. I think it's vitally important for your generation. The international dynamics will be key. Your future will be international in most of the cases. If it's not international, I can assure you, you will lose a lot of opportunities. Because it's not only the growth in China, which now today is 9%, or the growth in India, which is 6%. We are struggling to have 0.4%, no? But anyway. But it is also the capital that is now created in these countries who one day will seek its way into where. And there we should be ready to say, we have technology, we have international experience, we speak your language, and we will help you. Here we are the door to Europe, or we are the door to European success. And that's what we should do.
And where can be the added value on the part of business students here in Belgium, here in Europe, as compared to the increasingly international background of what are going to be their competitors in the emerging world? Because they're excellent students graduating from many business schools in China who are extremely international themselves.
I'm not sure that they are extremely international. I think they still have a few miles to go. Our advantage is that we have excellent schools. And the way you work, I admire that. And believe me, I have an experience with different universities. We sponsor several universities in all these countries. we want to be close to that, which is not exceptional. So I think that we have better schools. I think that we have that international tradition. I think we should revive it a little bit, because too often I see people looking inward. We should look more outward. We have technology. I have seen the days in the end of the 80s when my Chinese friends said, come and manufacture here. And 10 years later, they said, yes, you can come and we will manufacture jointly, but on condition that you bring technology. And now you hear more and more that in order to be there, they say, technology first. If you don't have technology, forget the market. And this, by the way, is a market in China of 1,400,000,000. Can you imagine what a dream for a businessman? That an internal market that's creating itself. And I think these are the strengths that we have, and many others. But we still need the passion to go international.
And the passion to be a real entrepreneur.
A real entrepreneur. I admire people who start their own business. Because I never did it. Each time I wanted to do it, I got a promotion, or I went to England, or my company went bankrupt. No, that's not true. But anyway, I admire people who say, and we see a number of youngsters who say, we come together and we start our business.
Let's listen to one. He's 32, and he's called Fabien Pinkers, and you probably know him. He's got his own company with 180 staff, operating from Redwood City, California, from Gujarat, India, and from Grand Rosière, Belgium.
Hi, my name is Fabien Pinkers. I'm the founder and the director of OpenERP. I have 32 years old, and I succeeded to get to 100 employees at the age of 30. OpenERP is an open source enterprise management software, and we compete against very big players like SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, and that kind of companies. As I was very young when I started the company, it was right after the university, we had to reinvent everything. So we did business very differently from the others, and it was a very good thing, because it helped us to succeed to create a very low-cost product, a different approach of the management, which is a key point of the success of OpenERP today. In today's new technology, it's very easy to work with different countries, with internet, with different culture. Everyone speaks English today. It allowed us to survive, because when you start and you have no money, you need to find new ways to grow very quickly and at very low costs. And in Belgium, it was very complex at that time. So for us, working with different countries with faster growth than in Belgium, it was a very great opportunity. So we moved a part of our R&D in India 2 years after I started the company. This helped the company to survive, because we succeeded to grow with a very low budget. To be successful, you must try, and I have to say that I tried a lot.
There we are. Real entrepreneurship, passion. He looks in good health. The kind of young man you were talking about.
Absolutely. I didn't know that this was coming. So, no, I admire this. I admire this. And by the way, this is a Belgian who started the company, and you hear him saying, and we went international. So it's not because you start here that you need to stay local. So he went international. And he has, what, 130 people?
180 already.
180.
So as a CEO of a worldwide group employing 28,000 people, what kind of advice would you give this young man in terms of, you would be looking for sustainable growth, right? So that's one of these obsessions that you have as CEO of a company. How does he get there, you think?
Well, I don't know his balance sheet, but I'm sure it's right. But you touched on an element which is important. Everywhere I went, I said to the management teams, bear in mind, sustainable, profitable growth. You need growth in your company, in encapsulating especially all the opportunities there are in the growth markets, but also, and we sometimes forget that in Eastern Europe, it's fascinating what's happening in Slovakia, in Poland, and these new, let's say, European states. There's a wealth of opportunity, and this is, Varsovie is what, 1 hour flight and then 20 minutes car, so it's very close by. Anyway, and sustainable, profitable growth are three words. If you can remember two things of today, it's sustainable, profitable growth and a passion for excellence, I'm a happy man. Sustainable, you need to try, whether they are economic cyclically or not, to have a sustainability in the things you do. The profit you need to pay yourself, to reward yourself, and all the people working with you, and also your shareholders and the community make a profit to reinvest in future technology.
He's been brave, he's been courageous. Is that enough? Is that a value in itself, or does it need to be balanced?
It is a good start. And if I hear people in the United States who are proud that they went bankrupt 2, 3, 4 times, and that's starting over and over again, I admire that. And we should try to have that same spirit, that same mentality of people who dare to start. I think it's very important.
At the same time, watching financial reporting very carefully, looking at added value per employee, I mean, a bit of discipline too, right?
I think that financial reporting is key. Whatever you do in life, make sure that you know the financial reporting, that the financial reporting reflects the reality in your business. And I, as you said, I have my own little favorites. I must say the margin for me is very important. What margin do I make on a product? The trade working capital for the economists in the room, I think it's vitally important. People sometimes forget what it is. The inventories, receivables, and payables, critically important. So yes, you're right. Financial reporting is key as a basis for discussion and also as a basis for developing a strategic plan.
All the same, watching out, you said, for what's going on in the world around you, in the environment, the political environment, be aware of what's happening around you. You can't afford to just expect the effect of all of it.
The socio-economic element in business today is becoming more and more important. If you see to the European crisis that we have today, these are governments. These are decisions by Ms. Merkel and President Sarkozy on things that happens in Greece. Now, this affects us all. And there were times after the Second World War where politics were not that vitally important. They were important because they raised taxes, but for the rest, they did their thing. Now, this has changed dramatically. A socio-economic, and if you believe in what I said earlier, that a company is part of a community, the community is important. The socio-political dynamics in a country are important. Are you going to invest a lot of money and a part of your future in a country that is not well run? Let's take a country, for instance, that does more than 2 years to form a government. Will you invest in that company? Anyway. But no.
No television cameras no here. You can speak your mind freely.
No. Well,
maybe some people watching online, though. Yes.
That's not a problem. No, I think that the sociological environment is an important element. You can't ignore that. And see the change you have in most of the country in the relationship with unions. Where unions become less militant and unions start to realize that it is only working with the company, with the management, the representatives, and whoever, that together you can create wealth.
On that environment that you mentioned, let's now hear from someone who, until a couple of months ago, was on the governing council of the European Central Bank, the former governor of the National Bank of Belgium. And I think he's got a question for you, Mr. Buysse. Mr. Guy Quaden.
You speak of declining Europe, probably of a relative decline of Europe, because there is the emergence of new countries in the international trade, and the share of old industrialized countries is declining. But the global cake must increase, and our enterprises should be able to benefit from the strong growth in emerging countries. We should be able to innovate. Innovation is again the key. We have to conceive, to produce new goods, to explore new markets. It's a challenge, but there is also a lot of opportunities for young and talented people. Dear Paul, you are an entrepreneur and a real one, and as such, I think you are constantly looking after solutions and not focusing on problems. So my question will be the following. What's your vision of the crisis in terms of opportunities for the new generation of talented people?
Okay, pretty broad question, Baron Buysse. We'll try and tackle it in a few minutes, maybe.
No, we'll do it now. I think it's fascinating to manage under crisis. First of all, it gives you an opportunity to tell the people around you that we will separate the man from the boys. We will now see the real value of managers. Operating and running a business when everything goes smooth and the market is increasing and everybody's banging on your door to get your products, easy thing to do. Sometimes you even forget to increase your prices, but anyway. And I think it's now really the moment to look at opportunities. And what always happens, it's a sort of epuration where weaker, not well-run companies with no product replacement, no technology, no presence in the market, who doesn't understand the socio-environment in which they operate, they will disappear. And they will either disappear from their cells or they will be bought. And if you go to all the crises, well, the crisis, you're too young to have a lot of experience in recessions, but if you look at all these crises, you will immediately find a number of companies where you said, yes, indeed, that's a company that used to be very successful.
What did they do wrong? Did they forget to watch their consumers? Did they, what exactly was it?
Well, they had the wrong strategy, and they didn't develop under the strategy management talent to execute that. Why did the Société Générale went bust? Because they were there in their ivory tower, they thought they were ruling the way, and they were not really with passion pushing where they should go. And in a recession, it becomes tougher. And we see that in many companies today. It is becoming tougher. So we need to react more quickly and more fundamentally. And we should be prepared for that. Every high, after every high comes a low. And when we are here in that high period, we should prepare for the low period. And that you can do through CapEx, through good investments.
Do you need a different type of business leader in this sort of environment?
I think that a business leader should be a very professional and successful one, and in crisis, and when it goes well. So I don't think that you can put somebody and say, you're for the crisis and you're for the good.
How about core values? In the case of Bekaert, it's about resilience, it's about trust. But does that also meet your own personal expectations of the way you want to do your work?
I'm glad you asked, because in preparing for this, I didn't know how well, what I should prepare. I didn't know, so, but I put a few notes here, and the third note on my list is no business without ethics. And I think that we have all a moral obligation to look at the ethical and corporate governance standards of our business. Because if you don't have the ethical base, forget the business over time. And you've seen that also with a number of examples where ethical behavior was no longer in order or at order, and you know what happened to the businesses.
And young students increasingly expect to be working for a business that is not only seen to be ethical, but that is. So it's a very important consideration from many different points of view.
Well, I have 5 children, and they're your age. A few are a little bit older. Mm-hmm. And I feel a lot of ethical responsibility there in that generation. I love to have a drink with their friends and with their girlfriends. And no, I must say the ethical standard is there, as the curiosity is there to understand better corporate governance. Is it something that we really need in a company? Is it something that is a waste? And I feel that these debates are ongoing. The only debate that I would like to hear a little bit more at this level is the political debate. And I see that that is a bit fading away and give priority to successful running a business.
Now you're saying that you notice that young students have less of an interest in politics and should take more of an interest in public affairs in that sense?
I think it's vitally important because if we believe what I said a minute ago, that politics are very instrumental in how you will run your business, you can't afford not to talk to members of parliament, not to write letters, not to come together with them and to explore this. And I would very much encourage you to do that, so that you can have the future of the company is yours. You are the future. So what you should do, you should try to help to really create and form your future, and there the politics are a very important element.
Baron Buysse, we have another question from another banker, this time from a private banker. It's not easy to be a banker these days, but I think this is a banker you know well, and he may even be a friend. I think he's on your board, Mr. Max Jadot, who is the Chief Executive Officer and the Chairman of the board at BNP Paribas Fortis.
So hello everybody, and specifically and especially hello to my friend Paul. So I'm here now to ask you a question in front of all the students who are around you. We discussed many times together the big changes, everything that's happening in the world of today, many challenges, technology challenges, obviously the changing of the world between the West and the East, obviously also the elements of innovation that are present, research and development that we have to do, the big challenges that we face as persons, as managers, in human resources, and all these elements obviously are dictating our life of today and probably and very much of tomorrow. And the question that we would like to ask you is, if you were today, and we certainly all would like to be like that, if we were today young again, and if we would be a young graduate again, which career path would we choose now in front of all these challenges? And specifically you, Paul, which challenge would you take up as a young graduate? Which job would you take up as a young graduate in front of all these major challenges, exciting but also difficult challenges that we face today in our world?
A very clear question for Baron Buysse.
Very interesting question. What I would do is not very relevant, because one of the experiences you will have is that the element of luck plays a role in a career. The people you meet, the bosses you have, and always try to find the strongest boss and the most popular and the most successful boss, because if he gets promoted, you get promoted. But I think what you really need to do is to follow your own personality. And if you're good in numbers and you believe in the banking, go to Max Jadot, who is a wonderful man and an excellent CEO. If you think you should be more of your own entrepreneur, well, develop the skills, thanks to your universities, to develop these skills. So you really have to vision yourself, what would make me happy? And never accept a job that makes you unhappy or frustrated. And if you are frustrated, leave that company and try to look for your your luck elsewhere. But it is very, very difficult to say. I was very fortunate in all the steps of my career. And yeah, fortune and luck is part of it.
Aren't you being slightly modest about this luck? Because some people get all the luck, and then you wonder, maybe as a human being, sometimes you can help serendipity a little bit, and you can make sure that you're there when luck happens. Napoleon is said to have told his generals, your first duty is to be lucky. And sometimes you can make sure you're luckier than most, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not Napoleon, and I don't have ambition to become one. But I think it's right. If you don't have the atmosphere to be happy in the things you do, it won't work. So follow your instinct. Follow what you really like to achieve in life. If that is your own business, try to start your own business. There are ways and means to do that. If you think a financial career, if you think a political career is important, for all means, go into the political movement and try to reshape this country and to try to help reshaping Europe. It will be vitally important for the next generations. But yes, luck, hard work, believe me. You will never make a career if you don't work very hard. You mentioned Ford Motor Company. We arrived there at 7:30, 8 in the morning, although it was normally foreseen for 9, and we stayed there till 7, 8 o'clock. Is this too much demanding? For us it wasn't, because we were young, we wanted to achieve, we wanted to make our career, and that's what we did. The tough thing, of course, is that in the meantime you have to watch your private situation and how your family is reacting, if there are children, you're married, your wife, your husband, anyway, and that is something you must manage as well, because you can't be happy professionally if you're not very happy at home and if you don't have a good sounding board at home. And believe me, that is one of the major challenges.
Mm-hmm. And you look happy, you are full of passion, and that is contagious, isn't it, within an organization? That, because when people use the word charisma, it sometimes sounds as if it sort of falls from the sky, but even the charisma is the result of dedication, isn't it? I mean, it's something that one generates, but it's also something that one can work on.
Well, you need to have respect for the human being at all levels. You need to talk to them. You need to conversate to them. You need to have a dialogue. One of the nice things I do is to go with my sons and to have a beer in a pub and to talk to the people and to feel what's really living. And if I walk through the factories, to talk to the operators as I talk to my shareholders or my directors. I think that is very important. The human element in business to be successful is extremely important. Mm-hmm. And by interrelating to people, you will start how to benefit from that interrelationship, and you will also do it better and better and better. Mm-hmm. It's like public speaking. I said earlier, the first time you stand before an audience, you're petrified, mm-hmm. And it's difficult. And then with doing it and a bit of self-confidence, because you are successful, well, at the end of the day, you can do it very fluently.
Mm-hmm. Let's have some more input, if you agree, from another captain of industry in this country. I suppose one of the key questions in our conversation so far has been, what does it take to be a good leader? A view on that point from Mr. Pierre-Alain de Smet, and he's, of course, the president of the Koning, the World Plastics Group, and, of course, he's also the chairman of the Federation of Belgian Industry.
It means, first of all, it has to be a real entrepreneur, somebody who is obsessed by getting the right results. On the one hand, he's a winner, a strong personality, somebody who can convince the others and who will regroup the others. So he is charismatic, he is strong from character, but he's also easy to correspond with. He would be kind of an optimistic character with a vision, of course. It's not sufficient to be nice. It's not sufficient, it's important to be a good communicator. The relationship today in terms of internal and external communication is of extreme importance. To be a good CEO, you need two things. You need to spend probably about 50% of your time to strategy and to human resources. Well, Paul, you have a very difficult task, which is now to define what are the soft skills which are expected from the CEO.
There we are. In a way, he's summing up what you've already described as what a good business leader is about, and he's particularly interested in the soft skills. You mentioned a lot of them, and you attach great importance to them.
Yeah, I like Pierre-Alain a lot. We were in a committee together that I chaired. I like him a lot. I don't think that his question is so difficult, by the way. And I'll tell him when I meet him. I think it all comes back to what we said earlier. Respect of people, respect of your colleagues or the people working for you. But that also includes that you have to correct them. You have to dare to tell them when they make mistakes. Or you dare to tell them when there are weaknesses and how they should deal with weaknesses. And let them make errors. Let them make errors and let them do stupid things as long as they're creative, as long as they help in your strategy, and if not, that it doesn't happen too often, because that you can't afford to have. But I think the soft issues really is maybe the 50% strategy and human resources is a little bit overdone. I would put a little bit less strategy, although it's vitally important. We do that every year. We discuss strategy at every board meeting. What changed in the environment? How will that impact my strategy? Where should I look for risks? Control your risk and things like that. And human resources, I agree, because it comes back to what I said earlier. A company or a business is us, people. We, the people, doing and creating wealth and creating sustainable, profitable good. So I think that if you can put some enthusiasm in what you're doing, you can listen to people, you can select the best people on all these criteria. And there is one thing that we didn't mention, that is the academic or the intellectual background. Mm-hmm. And I didn't mention it because I take it for granted that this is existing. In this audience, we should take it for granted. So with all the other elements, I think this will be a stroll of elements that can help you, I think, to be successful and to be a happy, successful entrepreneur or manager.
Okay, high time to take some of the questions from the audience online. You've been sending in questions, and of course in the auditorium here in Brussels there are questions coming up for Buysse. We'll take them. The first question, let me read it out to you. I'm discovering it together with you. Do you think that this quest amongst the global companies to look for the cheapest resources, goods and people have leveraged way too much outsourcing and offshoring, and we've crossed a dangerous border in destroying our own company? Well, it's a very broad question. Let's bring it back to the idea about good management. It also interferes with your obsession of being an ethical company, of thinking about all aspects of what the business is about, isn't it?
Well, we will only destroy our own economy if we don't prepare for the changes, if we are not in the middle of the changes, and if we don't command the changes. I think what I feel is that going to emerging countries only for the price is not the real thing. If you go to these, of course, local manufacturing is important if you can afford to do it, if your product affords it to do. But that's not the rest. We are, in most of these countries, not because they are cheaper, and they are. We have to do something in this country, especially on the cost of manufacturing and other issues relating to the cost for the company, because we are pushing them out. But they mainly were there because they have growth. If you look at China with 1.4 billion, if you look at India with 1.1 billion people, there is an internal market who is developing itself so rapidly. If you're not there, you will miss the train. So you need to have the vision, and with the vision, you need to have the strategy, and then you operate the operational way, the tactical way, in order to be there. And to be there with the people who will become or are your customers. And that's why the baseline of Bekaert is better together. You customer, you supplier, you banker, and we Bekaert, and all the other stakeholders, we must find us better in the activities we do. Mm-hmm. So it is not only the cheap offshoring that we have, it's really much more than that.
Mm-hmm. I think we have a question from the floor here in Brussels as well. There it is. Yes.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Buysse. It was very interesting. My name is Akilina, and I have a question for you. You are in so many countries. For instance, I have seen on your website, Bekaert yesterday, that you have about 40 plants in Asia, in India, China, Singapore, Indonesia. But my question is, how do you benefit from this cultural diversity that you have in your management?
Thank you for the question. We are in process of doing a leadership program, which means that all our senior managers, these are hundreds of managers, follow a number of classes like we have here today in a leadership program. So the cross, and this was really wonderful, the cross-fertilization between all these nationalities who didn't know each other very well, and they couldn't. They met each other on management meetings, but let's admit sometimes it's a bit superficial management meetings. Well, the cross-fertilization was spectacular. And I think that this is one of the strengths of a multinational company, that you can really look at all the pockets and all the talents that you have around the world. We have Brazilian running Chinese factories, just to give that as an example, and that's what we should encourage.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your question. There was another question that was sent in online about training as a student, generalist or highly specialized. What kind of candidates would you prefer at entry level in a company? People with highly expert technical backgrounds or more general training?
It depends on what job. You wouldn't put a lawyer in charge of technology. You can put a lawyer in charge of general manager. You can put an economist in charge of general management. But once you really want to be a specialist, and we have a lot of specialists, wonderful people, who really dedicate their time and their lives in developing, for instance, a product. And it's really the career that will make you happy, that will dictate if you go for a specialist or a more generalist. And their MBA will help you because it gives you a good platform to start off with.
We have another question from a student here wondering whether you believe it would be a good idea in Europe to have more training programs in English rather than in local languages. Would that be an added benefit? Do you think that's an important issue?
It's a touchy question because it touches on politics. And although I love the debate, I don't want to have the debate without the politics present. But nevertheless, I give you under reserve my viewpoint. Whether you like it or not, English is the language of the world in the business world today. Read, by the way, every week The Economist. You students have a few subscriptions and circulated the economy. So it is indeed the language of the world. Now, you can't participate in the international debate if you're not fluent in English, if you don't read the reports. So I am a very strong believer that a people, a strong people, like Belgium, Wallonia, or Flanders, can keep their cultural identity, but still can speak the language of the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your answer. What's the value of a PhD in management today? You want to put your foot in that one? Value of a PhD in...
Well, you're a super specialist, which means that it will be, in theory, it will not be a generalist. It will be a specialist. We have, I think in there, like we have 250 PhD metallurgy. Mm-hmm. These are people who live for their profession. In health, medicine, and all these sectors, you really have PhDs who work only for that. They make a choice. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you come to a general job, mm-hmm. PhD will be helpful, mm-hmm. but will be not as strong as you go for the discipline mm-hmm. In which you studied your PhD.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I think there was another question in the hall here. Yes, madam.
Innovation seems to be a key priority within Bekaert Group. Looking at the mission statement of the company, as the chairman of Bekaert, how do you achieve sustainable, profitable growth when we know that taking innovative initiatives is not always cost-effective?
It costs a lot to innovate, and you're one of the champions, not just in this country. You have research centers on other continents, etc. You believe in that, and you believe it's good for business, isn't it?
Well, the question is, who will make the products of the future? Who will make the products that we will develop and sell in 5-7 years' time? The second question is, and this is the practical side of innovation, if a major customer, and in part of our business we're very strongly related to tire manufacturers like Goodyear and Bridgestone and Michelin, if they have a new project, they would come to us and say, can we develop it together? Because they know, and I dare to say that because it's my customers who say that, we have the best technology in that field. So customers come to us and remember, better together, we develop jointly the new project, which means that the relationship with the customer, of course, is very strong, and later we will reap the fruits of what we invested. And we have also a small group of people who do all sorts of interesting programs that we guide and that we control, but where we are convinced that the chances of getting a new product or whatever new may exist, although not at a very short term. So innovation is important. It is too easy, well, it's not too easy, but it is another discipline to say, I will bring innovation down, so I bring the stream of future products narrower, and I will give everything to, say, my shareholders. That's not what shareholders want. Shareholders bring their money to your company in order to have sustainability, a good dividend, and a company that goes and is prepared for economic shocks.
Mm-hmm. One more question from the floor, I believe. Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. First of all, thank you for being here and for your advices. My name is Trifan Simeon, and I'm from an Eastern country, Eastern Europe country, and my questions are related to Moldova. But I'm born in Soviet Union. And my questions are related to this area. I'd like to know, so I've read that in January 2010, Bekaert opened the first plant in Russia, in Lipetsk.
That's right.
And I'd like to know, why Bekaert preferred this strategy, so to open this plant as a greenfield investment over an alliance or an acquisition. Secondly...
Okay, we'll take the first question, then we'll come back to your question. Yes. It's not that you've been shy of acquiring companies either, is it? I mean, your career has involved a lot of acquisitions.
This is a very tricky question. Let me answer it. We looked at acquisitions. We looked at joint ventures. We talked to the government. And finally, we decided to make a greenfield site.
Okay, so considered all benefits. It's very important
considered all.
And that was part of your strategy, was it?
Well,
How did it fit
we
into?
waited and looked what was happening to Russia. And then, as I said, we had all these discussions and these meetings. And finally, we took a decision to go on our own. And that may change. Because if Russia is moving in the direction that we hope it will move, maybe one day we will have 1, 2, 3 very professional factories that we can bring in at a higher level. So it's not cast in stone.
Okay, a second question, very briefly. Yes?
Then it's not the traditional way Bekaert enters the market, only by greenfield investments.
No, not at all.
It depends.
We just made 2 or 3 acquisitions in China, pure acquisitions. We are open for all business models. We have countries where we have a partner. We have countries where we are on our own. We have countries where we have a sort of a joint venture. So we're open. It really depends on the country, on the opportunities, and what we see in a medium to long-term future.
We have another question coming in from our viewers online. Thanks. Keep the questions coming. We're here to answer them with Baron Buysse as we speak. So the next question, for someone who wants to start their own business, what advice would you give them? Do you think it's a good idea to start a training period in a big company, or can we learn it all by ourselves, is the question.
Well, what I suggest to people who ask me the question is try to get to one of the big 4, the Deloitte's, Ernst & Young's, who go through their audit or to their other activities deep inside companies and who control or advise companies. This is one of the best schools. You have an excellent theoretical background here. If then you can spend 3 or 4 years in analyzing under guidance where other companies and why other companies failed, this will be the best school. If I had to give this advice to my children, I would definitely do it. And by the way, my son did it.
He followed
and he started his own business.
Okay. We have one more question from the floor. Yes.
Thank you very much for your tips. I'm an Erasmus student coming from Spain, and I'd like to ask you concerning the strategy building of your company, which stakeholders play a dominant role, and concerning the other stakeholders, as you have told us.
Okay, so the role of stakeholders in developing strategy.
The role of stakeholders, is that what your question is? The role of stakeholders in developing a strategy?
Which stakeholders play a dominant role and which one of the other ones, as you have told us, they are part of the community and the society the company works in. So which influence do they have?
We develop strategy. The basis of the strategy is developed by the management. And the management and the executive committee develop the proposal of a strategy. It comes to the strategic committee. I'm a very strong believer in having at the board 3 committees: strategic committee, audit and finance, and remuneration and nomination. And they prepare the proposals to go to the board. There it is discussed, and the board takes the decisions. And there is no influence whatsoever. From outside, I mean. I'm responsible for guiding this, and I'm also responsible at the annual general meeting where all the shareholders come together, and some stakeholders, to explain what we did and why we did it. So it's a very democratic system on how to develop and to implement strategy.
You mentioned all these committees, and when we heard from Mr. De Smet, you also mentioned that you were on a committee with him, and we've talked a lot about meetings, and inevitably, anybody who's the leader in business will go through lots of meetings and spend lots of time, and so you attach particular importance to organizing them well.
Well, the art of a meeting is you start in time. Before I was chairman of companies where the meeting was at 9 o'clock, and at 9:40 there was still somebody coming in. My meetings start at 9 o'clock sharp. I try to be as pragmatic as possible. And that means that the papers, the executive summaries and the files, the papers that I send to my directors are, thanks to the management, of a very high order. And so the discussion, and normally what we do on important issues, we invite the manager concerned, who does, say, a proposal for acquisition, to explain why he wants to do it. And that gives a dialogue between management and board, which is vitally important. Mm-hmm. But if you have good papers and you have discipline, meeting discipline on how you do it, and that nobody stands up and make a long speech on things which are not essential for the decision-making process, you can do a lot of work in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm. One more question from the floor.
So firstly, I would like to thank you. And my name is Virginie, and my question is there a place for entrepreneurship today in an organization like yours? And secondly, in which area would you advise us as future graduates to grow our career as entrepreneur? Will it be more in business units or in the headquarters?
Okay, two different questions. Do you expect each and every one of your staff at Bekaert to be real entrepreneurs?
Well, I hope they are. I hope they are, and I think we are. It's an interesting question because it has to do with the culture of a business. Mm-hmm. I want to be associated with a successful company. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to stand up and to very proudly say, I'm chairman of Bekaert. And I hope that if colleagues of mine at Bekaert would hear this, they would say, that's true, and me too. So the culture of a company is very important. And what was the second question?
Second question was about the type of training to get there, to become a real entrepreneur.
Well, you're doing the training. It depends what you really want. If you want to have a career within a company, join the company. If you want to start up your own business, I said it a minute ago, try to find a training period at one of the big four. They normally can use academically trained people like you, and there you will get a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about academic training. I think you attach great importance to your people reading, and they need to keep reading.
I said it, read The Economist. I'm not paid to make a commercial, but read The Economist, read newspapers. Be eager to learn and to understand. And not only the newspapers of your country, wherever you come from, but try to look at Financial Times, at Wall Street Journal, at Delhi News, and things like that, so that you understand what's happening in the world. And open it up, reading. I'm reading a fascinating book. If you, for Christmas, if your parents say, what can we offer you under the Christmas tree? There's a fascinating book written by Henry Kissinger, and it says, On China. Mm-hmm. Read the book on China. Did you read it?
I've only read excerpts.
It will learn you to understand the mentality of doing business in China, mm-hmm. and why our Chinese colleagues react sometimes slightly different of what we would expect. And this is what you read a lot.
Mm-hmm. From the man, of course, who organized the opening to China on the part of the United States under President Nixon. We have one more question coming in from an online viewer, and you may not have been watching the beginning of our conversation, but let me tell you one thing. Once it's over, you'll be able to watch it again and again, and you will notice that Baron Buysse has already discussed the point of corporate social responsibility. But Baron Buysse, since the question is coming in right now, maybe very briefly to sum it all up. You've said CSR, corporate social responsibility, it has to be part of the DNA of the business.
Exactly. You're part of a community. You have to act accordingly.
One more question from an online viewer. You are a very successful leader. Why did it happen to you? In other words, what are the main success conditions for becoming a top leader? Well, you would be too modest to speak just about yourself, but you've been describing what a good business leader needs to be. And did you know when you were graduating that you wanted to become a business leader?
I know that. My father was a lawyer, and he had 3 sons, and he wanted the 3 sons to become a lawyer. My 2 brothers became a lawyer. I did the wrong thing. I went into business. And in order to prove, I think partly that played a role, to prove to my environment that I could make it, I think I worked extra hard. I worked very hard. And that's what we said. You can't have a career with not working, and the balance with the private life. You remember that. So I think it is very important that you have, and I always come back to the same, that you have that passion, that you have your targets, and that you know what you want to do.
Okay, and I hear we're nearing the end. Maybe one last question from an online viewer. What makes you the happiest and maybe sometimes slightly frustrated about what you come across as you lead your business? This is a question from Francois in San Francisco. The best and the worst in your life, Baron Buysse.
Bonjour, Francois. I think the most frustrated is that you don't have a grip on political developments that are key to the future of the business world. And that you don't have a grip on certain situations where you know that we should react, that we should do certain things in order to keep the wealth that we have here, and you can't do that. That's frustration. And the most optimism in business is that when I see you, that inspires me. When I see you taking notes, I see you asking intelligent questions, and I had a wonderful afternoon, and I like you very much, and thank you very much for being here.
What an excellent way to end our conversation, isn't it? Thank you very much, Baron Buysse. And I'm afraid that's all we have time for this edition. Let me thank our sponsors, Belgacom, Deleuze, Ilia, and Telemark, and ICHEC, where we were the guest tonight. This was a top management production. We hope you'll be there for the next edition of Top 121, which is coming up in April. To each and every one of you here in Brussels and in cyberspace, see you very soon, and in the meantime, be brave.